Tonight, as we mentioned, Russian ships just miles off the United States shoreline. What are they doing there? We are asking the Pentagon and speaking in moments with a former KGB agent who explains why this show of force should not be overlooked. Also this evening, how did 8 potential ISIS terrorists make it through the southern border unnoticed? The head of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement is talking to NewsNation. Plus, the latest FBI crime data shows a major drop, but the numbers are being called into question. Did you think you'd be getting interest rate relief anytime soon? Why the group who impacts your loan payments is now downgrading its forecast. And he just played the Super Bowl. Now he's talking to Congress. Why Usher made his way up to Capitol Hill today. Come on in, I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And welcome to Washington tonight. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, there are real questions about who is in our front and backyards. We will speak with the Pentagon in a moment on why Vladimir Putin sent his ships just miles off of our shorelines and has them docked in Cuba right now. But first, 8 people from Tajikistan are in federal custody tonight. The government looking into what links they might have to the terror group ISIS. The men reportedly picked up in several major American cities after entering through the southern border. Our Brian Enton spoke to the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement earlier today, asking how they were able to cross the southern border given their potential background.
It's quite common where there's just nothing. You don't have anything. There's no criminal convictions. There's no threat information or whatever on these individuals. Or maybe these individuals are from an area that are particularly of concern, but that pops up later.
Now, according to reports, the men had been on the radar of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Joining us tonight here on The Hill, Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow as well at the American Enterprise Institute. Ashley Davis is a former George W. Bush White House official, and Michael Starr Hopkins is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. There was a lot going on the world stage, and then, of course, what happened inside several major American cities with these 8 possible terrorists. We'll get to that. Your thoughts in a second. But first, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff. Come on in, Mick, and hello to you. I wonder how you think the White House is going to deal with this, given the recent warnings from the FBI director, Christopher Wray, along with the border being essentially, if not the top issue, one of the top issues in this country right now.
Yeah, this is a really serious problem. We talked about it on the show probably, 3 weeks ago when Biden announced the new executive orders, maybe it was less than that, about how difficult it was going to be to put into place. There would have been a debate inside the White House. Keep in mind, there would be some folks in the administration who didn't want the president to do anything and try and blame it on Republicans in the House. There'd be another group who said, look, we're happy to do it, but we have to be able to do it. Because if you say you're going to make things better and you don't, then you overpromise and you underdeliver. And that is the kiss of death in politics. And my guess is, again, we've been down this road before, that it's a tough day right now in the White House. This is really, really bad news. Granted, nothing has happened, and that's fantastic. I get that. But this is a disaster from both a practical standpoint and a political standpoint.
Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. We will get to you in about 25 minutes time later in the show for Hot Mic with Mick, what Mick is hearing, what Mick is seeing and thinking. Mick, we'll catch you then in a moment. Chris, as he mentions the White House, how do they take this on and defend this given the president's border policies?
Well, this actually helps the president argue for the border policies, right? So it took Biden, 18 months, too long to come around to taking more significant action on the southern border. But why does he need to do that? Now, this is going to be argued in court. This is going to be argued in the court of public opinion, and this is going to be argued among his own party with progressive Democrats. Here you go. Prima facie case. Why do we have to have more security at the southern border? Here's 8 people who came in. And this is not a Trump talking point, right?
The FBI
Right.
involved, we believe.
These are not the tarted up numbers that Trump spokespeople trot out all the time and talk about these people. This is the FBI, and this is Joe Biden's best argument in favor of why he needs to do what he did.
You've been pounding the table on this for quite some time. This might be your biggest worry?
And it always has been. I mean, and I go back to the comment I make all the time that there's 360 people in the last 18 months that were on the terrorist watch list that were caught and sent back. So how
Fiscal
many
year
didn't
2022.
we catch? Yes. And how did we? And we caught those people and didn't allow them in. So how many are on the terrorist watch list that we haven't? And these people weren't even on the watch list. And you were talking about earlier with the ICE director, acting director. Who knows how these people are coming over? I mean, even if they are showing a passport, it may not be their real names. It may be, someone else in another country. But also, the ISIS concern that the FBI director has been pounding his fist on the Hill has been going on for a long time.
Right.
And remember, just this country alone borders Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yep.
I mean, it's over there breeding
Afghanistan
these
on
people.
one side, China on another.
China
when you talk
on the
about
other side. So this is... It's not surprising. I think it's concerning.
So how do you defend the president's border policies, Michael? Yes, he's taken executive action. Yes, we know about the Senate deal that failed. But this predates that, because this is believed these 8 men came over, at least in part, last year. So how do you defend what the president has done on the border when we see a story like this?
Well, I think this is a political nightmare for Democrats and Republicans. Republicans, because now, as Chris said, this puts right at the very forefront the conversation about the border bill and a Republican-authorized or written border bill. And for Democrats, this is also the nightmare in that the president of the United States needs to make sure that he's making Americans feel like they're safe. And there's a legitimate threat coming from the border with people crossing and us unable to really identify.
But I don't hear him say that. I hear you say that, but I don't hear the top of the ticket say that.
I mean, it's a tough comment to make when you're president, because you're trying to ensure that everyone feels safe while also trying to negotiate a bill which Republicans wrote and now Republicans in the House won't actually put up to vote. And so he's kind of put in a position where he's upset the progressive side and is unable to get a bill actually passed.
And he overturned 60 executive orders when he came into office that opened up the border.
But the border's been a disaster since Reagan. There was a reason why he repatriated and allowed all this.
It's been a disaster for decades, right? Yeah. And I guess, Chris, to your point, that puts the president front and center now with stories like this. I'll let you wrap it there.
It's true. What you say is true. I wrap it by saying what you say is true. And the number one job of the president of the United States is to keep the nation safe.
Right.
And Biden should take this as a call to action and say, Tom Suozzi won a House seat on Long Island, New York, by out-bordering the Republican candidate.
He's a Democrat.
And if I was Joe Biden, if I was a Democrat, I would say I'm embracing this issue. This is a good reason to start and hit it hard and keep hitting it hard and let the progressives be mad. And at the end, you're going to have to say the progressives, okay, me or Trump,
you have the ACLU suing potentially the Biden administration over his border executive order, which, if you're a Democrat, from a political perspective, you probably use the support of the ACLU.
So the ACLU...
Well, actually, I think it's helpful for Democrats right now to the ACLU on the other side, because it allows Democrats
shift the blame to them.
Exactly, and allows us to appeal to moderates.
And that case from the ACLU, or at least they filed a lawsuit today here in Washington, D.C., trying to put a hold on the president's border executive actions. All right. Also tonight, a fleet of Russian warships is now docked in Havana, Cuba. That is just 90 miles south of the state of Florida. The fleet is made up of a Russian ship, a nuclear submarine, an oil tanker, and a salvage tug. Russia's hypersonic missile, by the way, is also believed to be on board. Now, this comes as tensions continue to rise between Russia and the United States after President Biden authorized Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to strike inside Russian borders. So, why is Vladimir Putin sending his ships off our shores? I spoke with the Pentagon's Deputy Press Secretary, Sabrina Singh, just a little while ago. Sabrina, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. We appreciate your time as always. Let's start here as you stand at the Pentagon right now. I wonder what your assessment is over at the Pentagon right now, Sabrina, as to why Russia has sent these ships to Cuba. What is the assessment right now?
Well, thanks for having me on this evening. Look, our assessment is that these ships do not pose a threat to the United States. These are exercises that we see the Russians do almost every single year and have done in previous administrations. So this is something that is routine for the Russians. Countries all around the world conduct exercises in international waters. The Russians often make port calls to Cuba. We've seen this again in the past. So we're going to continue to monitor what's going on in the region. We always do that, especially when foreign countries operate close to the United States or close by in our waters. But again, these ships do not pose a threat to the United States or our assets in the region.
I hear you on the threat. I hear you on the assets. Why now, though?
Well, that's something that Russia would have to answer for you on that front, on their timing. We have seen these exercises happen almost every single year. So I think it's important to remember that when they time these exercises, again, they're gonna have another exercise, probably a larger one at the end of or sometime in the fall. So it's not going to be unexpected that we might see more Russian activity in our hemisphere, in our waters or near our waters. What's important to remember, and I think the most important factor here, is that they don't pose a threat to the United States or any of our naval assets in the region.
I know you don't share all the back channeling, but I saw you up at the microphone, and as we're hearing from you and speaking to you now, Sabrina, this idea of no threat, and obviously no one wants to see a threat, right? But I wonder if what the back channeling has been like, to which you are able to assure the American public that there is no threat. Have you been speaking with the Russians directly?
Well, it's not something that we have to speak with the Russians directly. These are ships that they operate, that they have used in exercises. I think what's important context here is countries all around the world, including the United States, conducts exercises at any given time. These are routine exercises that we've seen the Russians do time and time again through multiple administrations. So this goes back for many, many years. The United States conducts exercises all around the world. In fact, I announced an exercise that the National Guard was doing or is doing in Virginia Beach, happening now on cybersecurity. So we conduct exercises all over the world at any given time. So do other countries. So I think that's an important reminder. We don't assess that that these Russian assets are carrying nuclear capabilities with them. These are standard ships that we've seen operate in the region before, and we are expecting another fall exercise later this year that we will monitor.
So let me leave you with this, because there is a nuclear-powered submarine there, but you do not believe any of Russia's, which has a deep nuclear capability, you do not believe that any of its nuclear technology or nuclear power is aboard any of these ships?
We don't assess that this particular submarine is carrying nuclear-capable weapons. This is something that we've seen routinely used in different exercises. Again, I think the biggest takeaway here for your viewers is that what we're seeing in Cuba with more Russian ships moving into our hemisphere is that it does not pose a threat to the United States or any of our assets in the region.
Sabrina Singh, the press secretary over at the Pentagon, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. All right, over now to someone who has a very unique insight into the Russian mindset, maybe even the mindset of Vladimir Putin. Jack Barsky was recruited by the KGB and put into the U.S., where he spent 10 years spying for the then Soviet Union. He later left the KGB after decades of living in the U.S. under an assumed identity. He was discovered by the FBI. He is the author of the book Deep Undercover and tells his story of the speaking circuit. Jack Barsky joins us here live. Jack, it is always great to see you and speak with you. I wonder, after listening to the Pentagon there and after seeing what we saw in Cuba today, what do you think Vladimir Putin is doing here? And do you think this is serious?
Well, far be it for me to criticize somebody who should know more than I do in terms of what's going on, right? I don't have any information, so what you get from me is an educated guess that's based on what I know about Putin and what I know about Russia per se. And because it's not a surprise that when I tell you that I'm an amateur historian, particularly about Russia, Russia, Ukraine, and Putin. Okay, so Vladimir Putin, I think, is again up to his own tricks. He likes to scare people. He likes to scare the holy, what, out of people. And, in light of the fact that he has dropped some hints about, using tactical nukes and then taking it back and then having one member of his administration make even stronger statements like that, you got to be worried about this kind of stuff. This is not. You can't look at this as just a routine exercise. It has to be seen against the background where where Putin is stating that he's actually fighting the West in Ukraine and not just Ukraine.
Do you think he's trying to send a message to President Biden? Do you think he's trying to send a message to the United States? If so, what?
Yes, everything that Putin does is sending messages, and particularly threatening messages. And if I may, what I'm concerned about here, there's a parallel. In 1962, you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Mm-hmm. There was a submarine outside of the Cuban shore, and that had a nuclear-tipped missile, and that came awfully close to being launched. Okay, and that's a historically proven. And only because of the rule was all three the crew members had to agree for that launch to happen, and the second in command, Vasily Arkhipov, said no. And American officials have gone on record to state that this was very, very close. And with this kind of tension that we have all over the world right now, there's always a possibility of an accidental launch. I'm worried about that.
Jack Barsky, I wish we had more time. It's always great to speak with you. We'll leave it there. Hope you come on back here on the Hill soon. Thank you, sir.
I'll be glad to. Bye.
Yep, have a great day. All right, meantime, coming up here on the Hill on NewsNation over the next 43 minutes. Why do you think the FBI for the first time put out crime statistics this early into the year? I'll share why that's likely just one of several headlines you're seeing at this point in time. Plus, the New York Times now taking a page from Mick Mulvaney. It's the vice presidential candidate Mick has been saying to watch for months. And we're going to talk to Mick about it. Plus, after we speak to Mick, and with him and Ben Carson, Steyerwalt going to be breaking down one of the key states in this election, the state of Pennsylvania. We got some new polling out, and I think really this is the first time that we've got some good polling post-Trump verdict.
It's true, but you're going to make me follow Mulvaney. He's got a bird, he's got an octopus, he's got the open-collared vibes. I got nothing. What am I? I'm just over some guy in a suit.
You've got great numbers.
I do have
great personality.
Last night he had the same background, plus his hair was sticking.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. Other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. We are just 15 days from the first scheduled presidential debate. So is that the reason we are seeing stories like these? Splashy headline over the last day. The FBI reports a major reduction in violent crimes. The overall rate down roughly 15%. Robberies falling by nearly 18%. But as Jeff Asher of AH Datalytics notes, this is the first time the FBI has released first quarter 2024 crime numbers this early. In a post on Substack, he writes that, quote, crime almost certainly declined nationally in the first 3 months of 2024 compared to the first 3 months of 2023, but the FBI's data is almost certainly overstating that decline. And remember this from last week, the president announcing executive actions to try to stop the flow of illegal immigration at the southern border. However, numbers obtained by NewsNation show the number of daily encounters has not dropped. You can see that red line there on your screen. That is 2,500. The number that can trigger stopping asylum claims. You see there in the bar graph, it's been consistently above that. All right, Michael, you do Democratic comms.
Yes.
Is this what we're going to see leading into the debate 15 days from now? Stories like that, policy like that put out there just to tee the president up so he can say, see on this, see on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I don't know if it's just to tee the president up, but it's the power of the presidency. He gets to use not just the bully pulpit, but gets to use the executive branch and the offices to be able to show that his policies are working and also to bolster his argument. I mean, he's got statistics that prove that the Biden administration is doing a good job, that we're heading in the right direction, and he should be using that. And it's about time that we've seen them use it in a way that really matches.
Because for the FBI, that's the first time we've had these numbers out this early.
Hey, good. If we have good results, let's put it out there.
Numbers, but I just think that are people really living their lives on these numbers because they, one, economic numbers, they're still feeling all the stuff that they're feeling at the pump. We can go through all that. Yeah. But also, when your car's getting hijacked here in Washington, or if you're Walgreens and CVS that have to shut all their doors because of all the retail crime, I mean, I just don't know if people are going to believe the numbers when it's still happening in their backyard.
What about this from the Washington Post? For the first time, researchers have detected a significant drop in atmospheric levels of harmful gases that deplete the ozone layer and warm the planet. And then from the Post today, why scientists fear a second Trump term and what they are doing about it. Basically saying the government agencies are none too thrilled of a second Trump term. Are we...
Yeah, I mean, look, the government agencies aren't excited. The American public's not excited. This is exactly the argument that the Democrats need to be making headed into this debate, because for most Americans, this is the first time they're tuning in. They're not really looking at data. They're not looking at statistics. They're looking at their pocketbook, their bank account, and seeing how they feel now versus 4 years ago. And that debate is going to start in 2 weeks.
All right. Meantime, today, House Republicans held the United States Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress, recommending charges to the Department of Justice that Garland runs, of course. All this over Garland not releasing the audio tape of special counsel Robert Hur's interview with President Biden. The president asserted executive privilege over the tapes. Republicans claim the transcript they have is not enough, and they want to know why Hur didn't charge Biden when Democrats say it's all a political ploy.
Justice Department said we're going to operate independent of the White House. Okay, maybe so, but what we do know is this. One former president's being charged, Joe Biden's not being.
And holding the Attorney General of the United States in contempt is one more useful distraction from the complete and devastating implosion of the Biden impeachment probe.
Garland becomes the third attorney general to be held in contempt of Congress, Chris. So I just asked him about, is this what we're going to be seeing out of sort of White House comms leading into the debate? And today you get Republicans doing this, which I think is probably a massive waste of time.
Well, as my good friend, my dear friend Megan McArdle says, embrace the life-changing power of and.
What does she mean by that?
So in this case, there is no understanding of executive privilege that would permit the President of the United States to keep this audio transcript secret, or this audio recording secret. There's no national security argument. The reason that we have executive privilege is so the presidents can freely consult with their advisors without concern that these things will come out later on. So they need a secret space so that they can do this stuff. Biden's got no case. There's no case to be made here. And he even says it. They even say, well, the only reason they want this is to hurt us politically. I'm sorry, that's not an argument. And as a journalist, I say, hand them over. On the other end of Capitol Hill, or on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, what are the Republicans doing? Biden's right about that. Why do they want these audio recordings to try to that impeachment? What do they call it? An impeachment? They put an impeachment inquiry.
Right.
That thing has been a goat rodeo the whole time, and this is it. But it's their right. They're the Congress. They can have it.
All right. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. On the other side of the break, Hot Mike with Mick. Hello, Mulvaney. I think he's out there somewhere. Inflation, some big news today. Hey, Mick, on that front. And Mick's been sort of touting the idea of, you know what? Don't sleep on Dr. Ben Carson being the vice presidential candidate potentially for Donald Trump. And you know who took Mick's side today? The New York Times. You like the New York Times being on your side, Mulvaney?
I don't tell my Republican friends about it, if that's your question.
Okay, there we go. Hot Mike with Mick, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So it is the top issue for voters, and tonight we have a better look at inflation and how the Federal Reserve might adapt to rising prices. We learned today that inflation increased by 3.3% over the past year, but it stayed flat over the past month. Food prices on the whole, for example, rose around 2%, while housing costs remain elevated, up about 5.5% year over year. Now, just hours after the inflation report, the Federal Reserve decided not to cut interest rates, which was widely expected, but it also downgraded its prediction for how many interest rate cuts it could make this year, predicting right now there will likely only be one. The Fed, by the way, has 2 more meetings, July and September, before the November election. Time now for Hot Mike with Mick, the former congressman, budget director, White House chief of staff, tells us what he's hearing, what he's thinking. All right, Mulvaney. So inflation at least staying steady or cooling somewhat month over month, though still too high for the Federal Reserve. And they were in the area of maybe 3 rate cuts this year, and they just brought it down to, they believe, 1. Wonder what your takeaway was from today and how you think this may or may not impact the election.
Yeah, there's actually some speculation early in the year there might be as many as 5 cuts this year, which I just think is absurd. Here's the situation the Biden administration finds itself in. Again, we talk about the 3 I's, which is inflation, immigration, and Israel being the top issues right now. And here's the problem they have with inflation. They've got inflation when the job market is full. So every time they have a really good jobs number, and they had a great jobs number last week, I think it was 270,000 people, that's those jobs created. That's a great number, but it creates more pressure on prices and makes it less likely that the Fed is going to cut. So it's almost like good news is bad news right now for the Biden team, and it's going to continue like that all the way through the summer. But keep in mind, what does Stirewalt say again and again, and he's absolutely right, the window on this is closed. Before the end of this month, certainly before the end of next month. Otherwise, they're going to have serious problems.
Okay. I think we got you back there, Mick. We lost you for a second on what Stirewalt was saying. I think the point you were making was even if they start cutting rates here sometime soon, that July 1st is really the magic date for how people feel about the economy.
Yeah, people are not. Good news in October does not save Joe Biden.
Right. Okay. All right. Over to the campaign trail now. You might want to take a little bit of a victory lap here. Not yet, but I guess you can start stretching maybe. Because as Donald Trump's 2016 rival turned cabinet secretary, Ben Carson, the right guy. New reporting from the New York Times says don't count him out as the former president's pick to be his running mate in 2024. Quote, given Mr. Trump's unconventional approach and history of last-minute decisions, a surprise is possible. And in the wide universe of unlikely, but he just might do it picks, Mr. Carson is probably the leading contender. You have been saying this for quite some time, Mick. Why?
Yeah, and I read the piece, and Mike Bender's a good reporter. He used to be with the Wall Street Journal, now with the New York Times, and I'm not just saying that because he agrees with me. His article focused on an important component of why I've been talking about Ben Carson from the very beginning, which is the personal friendship and the connection between Donald Trump and Ben Carson. They just like each other, and importantly, Trump trusts him, and that's what he's looking for in a VP. What the article does not go into in the New York Times is that concept of why. What is it about Ben Carson that he's got that nobody else has got? My guess is I get the feel he's the only person who doesn't really want to be president. You talk about J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, go down the list. Everybody else on the list is a likely presidential aspirant, not Ben Carson. And if Donald Trump is looking for somebody who's happy to stay in that number 2 slot for 4 years, Ben Carson goes to the top of the list.
All right, so speaking of happy, let's keep Mick happy for a second here and work in a world in which Mick is right. And This is the pick. What would Ben Carson bring or not bring?
He probably would harm Trump's chances because Trump's deficiency is with so he has a base problem with traditional conservatives. We'll call them Nikki Haley voters. Okay. So he doesn't do anything for the Nikki Haley voter. And he certainly doesn't do anything with Trump's general election problem, which is suburban women. And so you get, there's no net. And I think a lot of this comes down to the question of, what does Donald Trump think the state of the race is? If Donald Trump believes that he is ahead and cannot lose, then he will have an indulgent pick like Ben Carson or whatever.
So you're saying that would be like a safe, for lack of a better term.
That's a self-indulgent pick. That's the pick you make because you think that you're going to win no matter what. So you pick. It's when Bill Clinton chose Al Gore. He wanted to feel the vibes, to bring it all together. He wasn't doing anything to reach out. Carson doesn't get you anything. And the point of vice presidential picks is you are going to shore up inside your party, which theoretically leaves the person at the top of the ticket to reach out. Okay. And so I don't know what.
Before we get back to Mick,
can I just burst his bubble just for
Sure.
1 second? Sorry, Mick. But the New York Times did this on Monday for Burgum. They did another candidate. They're doing them.
Why are you so mean?
Why
are you taking
but
away?
they are. So it's not like they just did Ben Carson. They're going through the list that's being vetted.
What do you think it would mean?
I just think it poses the juxtaposition of Ben Carson, kind of the sleepy Ben Carson, against the neurotic, high-energy Trump. It puts a spotlight on his erratic behavior, and even more. I don't think it does anything. It's not as bad as Tim Scott in terms of
you're mad, sir. You're mad, sir.
But,
you're mad.
Nick, before we move on, give me a percentage shot. You think it's actually Ben Carson?
25.
25? Okay, cool. All right, meantime, Mick, there is talk of a new leader in the Trump family dynasty, potentially Don Jr. Axios out with an article entitled, Donald Trump Jr. moves to be MAGA's new kingmaker. Something to this, Mick?
Sort of. A lot of us have been waiting for this discussion, which is who's Trump after Trump, right? And keeping it in the family, sort of an American tradition. I mean, I remember, Chelsea Clinton was going to be big in politics. Michelle Obama was going to be big in top politics. Of course, George W. Bush was big in top politics. I'm old enough to remember when people were wondering whether or not Amy Carter was going to go into politics. So this family progression is natural. That being said, as talented as Don Jr. is, there is nobody else like Donald Trump. He is a one-off kind of thing. And even if your name is exactly the same, you're not exactly the same person. So certainly he's going to get a look, but I don't think the red carpet's going to be rolled out for him just because his last name is Trump.
So Congressman Jim Banks is running for Senate, Republican. Quote, I see President Trump as the leader of the party, but I see Don Jr. as building the next generation. Does that sort of hit it for you, or no? Or is that just bending,
Wow.
That's kissing somebody's rear end is what that is, if that's your question. So
there you go. All right, that's the phrase I was looking for.
Charlie Kirk would disagree with that.
Mick, did you add a fish behind you?
I did.
Well, we've got a shell. We see the shell. We see the bird. We see the octopus.
He did.
Oh, there is a fish.
I added the fish last night because someone, believe it or not, and I'm not making this up, called me and said, why do you have an octopus on the wall? It's an anti-Semitic symbol. And I said, are you serious? Is that really for... I'm in Key West, Florida. I'm trying to put stuff up that is relevant to where I am. And I'm like, so you know what? I'm leaving the octopus because it's not anti-Semitic. But I put a fish up there just to remind him. By the way, I have a fervently Zionist parrot, by the way, if you're looking for balance. So
that is a Zionist parrot. I can tell.
We'll leave it there. Hot Mike with Mick. Clearly feeling the vibes down there in Key West. Mick Mulvaney, thank you, sir. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Thanks, Sean.
You got it. All right, coming up, it's the state that President Biden might need to win the most. But now we know how voters in Pennsylvania are responding to the Trump verdict and where some movement is potentially occurring. Steyerwalt here to break it down on the other side of the break. These are new numbers, sort of the best numbers we've gotten post-Trump verdict.
That's exactly right.
Chris will break it down.
It's going to be delicious.
Special guest Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
I know a lot, Cuomo, and you'd be very wise to listen very closely.
Toe to toe and TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
Can't wait till the next time I see you.
Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
The first state to set age limits for candidates running for Congress. Voters approved a measure last night that limits congressional candidates from running if they turn 81 years old during their term. The average age, in case you're wondering, in Congress right now, 57 years old in the House, 64 in the Senate. Average age in this country right now, 38 years old. This sort of captures the sentiment of obviously the top of the ticket, and most folks think those two are too old. Do you think we're going to see more of this?
This is something I've been calling for. I think we need a constitutional amendment setting upper limits on the ages for the offices. We have lower limits for the ages for the offices. To serve in the Senate, you have to be 30. To be president, you have to be 35. We need a cap at the top end because people are living so much longer now. I doubt, though, that North Dakota's law will survive the obvious legal challenges.
So that's coming. Last constitutional amendment that would do this, which, by the way, you need, I think, 2/3 of the state and like 3/4 of Congress. Happened in 92, so that's 32 years ago.
We should get back to amending the U.S. Constitution. That's something that we're not doing enough. No, I'm serious.
A constitutional convention would be an absolute.
Well, we can. A constitutional convention is not as bad an idea as you may think. There are questions about it, but you know how we changed the Constitution before was exactly through the process that Blake laid out, and it's something that we did quite a lot, relatively speaking, in the 70s and 1980s. There's a lot that we have to talk about, and it's not just the age limits, it's term limits, it's other things that we need to add to our charter. Harumph.
By the way, members of Congress who would not be allowed to run in the state of North Dakota right now based on their current age: Chuck Grassley is 90, Nancy Pelosi 84, Mitch McConnell 82, Bernie Sanders 82. And by the way, those are just some of the names that we pulled out to show you where things are. All right. Meantime, over from North Dakota to Pennsylvania, where we have fresh numbers on the rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump and how voters there are reacting to the former president's guilty verdict in New York. It is a must-win state for the incumbent. So is the guilty verdict helping or hurting? And if so, who? Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris?
All right. I'm a poll snob. And we have had no good polling on the state of the presidential race since the verdict in Donald Trump's case. Not one. We have had not one poll, but now we have one. This is Marist College, the MAPO 2024 presidential general election. Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, 45-47. Okay, so what? I hear you out there. You say, so what, Steyerwalt? This is another race, just like all the rest of the swing states. Trump slightly ahead, but it's all within the margin of errors. Or margin of error. What do we care? Well, we care. First thing, this is a primo poll, large number of humans in the sample from a good survey place. So that's number one. Number two, they asked Trump's guilty verdict in New York. Do you think that it was correct? Half of the people in Pennsylvania, half of the voters in Pennsylvania almost said that they did. And you throw in the 25% that said it was unethical but not illegal, and you have a lot of people who think Donald Trump was up to no good. Even more revealing, do you think the investigations, not just this one in New York, but the investigations generally into Donald Trump's misconduct are fair or unfair? 54%. That's a ton. So why this? Why, when we look at the numbers all together, 2024 Pennsylvania general election poll with the shadow others undecided, and we 3% of that, I think, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and 3% is undecided. So most of these voters are not Trump voters. They're not. Trump's already at a ceiling from where he was in Pennsylvania before. Donald Trump's not going to 52% in Pennsylvania or something. Those are Biden voters. Biden needs those voters. And on his central issue, they agree with him. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, be they Yinzers, be they Philadelphians, be they whatever, they agree with him in the main, but they're not voting for him. Look at this. Better handle preserving democracy. They can't. It's even. The argument has not landed. Biden's argument has not landed. Why is he losing? He's losing because on the other issues, who would better handle? Look at these numbers on the economy, 54-45, immigration 55-43. That's a brutal bludgeoning. The only place where Biden has a substantial advantage is on the question of abortion, and that will help Democrats. But here's the thing. Voters have concluded that they don't think that Donald Trump is a good person. That's for sure. They're not under any illusion that Donald Trump is a good guy. But they also are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about immigration. And as long as that's true, this will not. So there's a very long way of saying the verdict is important and the ongoing legal problems for Trump are important, and it's hurting him. It's keeping his ceiling low, but it's not going to be enough to win it for Biden.
Did you make fun of my Western part of?
I'm pro-Yinzer.
My feelings are hurt.
I'm solid pro-Yinzer. I'm Steelers and Penguins all the way.
One of the things I wrote down here, did I hear you say RFK Jr. at 3%?
Yeah.
But he's not on the ballot yet.
Yeah.
Is that why?
Yeah, he's not on the ballot.
And if he gets on the ballot in Pennsylvania, then that would shake,
all things are possible, right. The good book tells me, but RFK is rapidly approaching this question about the viability threshold. And if you can't get over 15, 20%, if you can't get in the zone that you start doing it, then support fades away because the support runs off.
When you see those economy numbers, how do you win as a Democrat?
I think it's making sure you talk about specifics. I think it's where you've got to talk about job numbers, the economy improving. I think it's inflation being down. down. It's tough to talk about the economy because I think Americans have such a short memory when it comes to the Trump administration and what things look like. So I think you really have to be able to roll out specific stories of voters whose lives have been improved under this administration, how the cap on insulin has affected voters.
I think my poor sister who lives in suburban Pittsburgh is going to be so inundated with direct mail and television. They're going to fight I'm sorry, all you Pennsylvanians, you're going to get totally spammed for the next 5 months.
Michiganders.
That's right. Michiganians. Come on. Michiganians. Okay,
By the way, Usher today made an appearance at the U.S. Capitol to meet with members of Congress about diabetes awareness. The 8-time Grammy Award winner appeared with the Georgia Senator Ralph Warnock to discuss insulin access for Americans. You can see him there coming down the steps of the Capitol. Last year, Senator Warnock and Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, Democrat, Republican, introduced legislation capping the price of insulin at $35. And the price of insulin, of course, one of the key things that President Biden points to.
This is a micro target, Georgia being such a big swing state.
But I think Little John's going in for Trump, so they're going to have it's going to be.
Trump, by the way, did an interview today with Logan Paul, and we'll play some of that. Yeah, he did. We'll play some of that tomorrow. Other side of the break, the mother of Hunter Biden's 5-year-old daughter, who has yet to meet the president, speaks with Leland Vitter. Leland joins us here on The Hill. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So the mother of Hunter Biden's daughter speaking out for the first time after Hunter Biden's conviction on federal gun charges to the host of On Balance, Leland Vitter. London Roberts says 5-year-old Navy Joan has never met her grandfather, the President of the United States.
Well, as a mother, I feel like there's not enough people that can love your child. And if there are grandparents that can step in and play a positive role in your child's life, I don't see how that's a bad thing.
Leland Vitter joins us live. What'd you make of that interview last night?
You felt bad for him.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. And we don't need to spend a lot of time recounting how she and Hunter Biden met. Mm-hmm. But it was at a club that perhaps you wouldn't want your son to meet his mother of his child. The takeaway, I think, from this was just how bizarrely dark of a place Hunter Biden was in. And for as much as Joe Biden is by Hunter's side right now and was meeting him at the tarmac after his conviction and bringing his and has completely thrown this woman under the bus, and the Biden family really threw this